Good evening. The time now is 6:32. I'm Chairman Mike Curry, and I'd like to call this Board of Selectmen business meeting to order on this 11th day of March 2020. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Outstanding. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize a couple of VIPs that we have with us tonight. We've got, I think, the whole Phillipston Board of Selectmen here tonight. Ms. Kim Pratt, John Telepsiak, sorry about that, John.
No problem.
And then your new member, Gerhard Fandendreyer. Fandreyer, sorry, I added an extra A-N when I was spinning the.
That's all right, I've been
And
called.
of course, Kevin, thank you for joining us, as well as their town administrator. And we have Paul Bishop performing, or at least presenting for the fire study. Oh, I'm sorry, and I don't recall your name.
Chief Jeff Parker.
Chief Jeff Parker, thank you for joining us this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to state for the record that the entire proceeding this evening, except any executive sessions, which we will have, are being recorded for both TCTV Cable Station 8 and TCTV YouTube channel. Therefore, there's no additional need for recording. If you wish to, please let us know.
Yep. That's all, like, I'm recording.
Oh, you're recording. Thank you for letting us know.
Athol Daily.
Perfect. So Athol Daily is recording as well. As always, excuse me. As always, our agenda for this evening has been set no later than 48 hours out by law, and it's publicly available at the official source for town information, templetonma.gov. I would also remind all citizens of our 4 villages to sign up or register for emergency updates using Code Red system. It is on the left-hand side at the bottom of the website. Although I have the discretion as chairperson to add and remove from the agenda, it has been set to allow for time, personnel, resources, and public awareness. I reserve the right to remove the agenda or items out to best fit our business, our guests, and time. Thank you. Before we begin tonight, public comment. Is there any public comment? I know that at least we have an update. Okay, Jeff's coming first.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Bennett, Partridgeville Road, Templeton. Although I sit on the select board, I'm leaving my selectman hat at the table for now. I have some items that I think are more appropriate for public comment. First of all, and these are things that I observed either being at meetings, watching meetings, or reviewing the town's website. Town of Templeton, biannual town meeting vote, created a bylaw back in 2004. It says the Board of Selectmen shall designate an official town website for the posting of town business, provide for its maintenance, security, improvement through a specific budget line item in the fiscal year following passage of this article. The fiscal year 2021 budget under IT has a town website annual fee of $2,500 and a domain name for $450, which would be the email address. And according to the bylaw, that amount of money set forward is for the maintenance, security, improvement, updates. I believe the information on the town website should be correct and up to date. The Templeton town has no charter, nor do we have a town manager that I am aware of. Posted on the town website, under contracts and agreements, there's an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Winchton for animal control. It shows it was signed by the town manager of Winchton, Keith Hickey, and the town administrator, Carter Terenzini. And the top of the document clearly states Town of Winchton, Town of Templeton, acting through its town manager and town administrator. The document is signed by Carter Terenzini, but it has printed under title and name Carter Terenzini, town manager. We don't have a town manager, and perhaps that's being picky, but back to the town meeting vote. a sum of money for the maintenance, security, and improvement of the town's website. The second item is the intermunicipal agreement for accounting services with the town of Hubbardston. The town's personnel policy on page 29, it's posted also on the town website. It lists full-time employees as those who work at least 40 hours per week. Yet town hall employees are listed at 38 hours per week, fiscal 2021 budget book. And that is also posted on the town website, the entire budget book. Again, it might be being picky, but if you go back to the original intent of the vote of the town meeting, the money set aside is for the maintenance and improvement. Posting inaccurate information or the Board of Selectmen not reviewing that document as well as others, and I'm sure this isn't the only town that it happens in, but this happens to be the town that I care about. Those things should be looked at and updated when changes are made. We have the Select Board responsible. If you look at the personnel policy, it is supposed to be updated, and I have a copy if anybody questions that. And we also have paid professional staff that when they bring policy changes, such as the change of full-time hours from 40 to 38 or whatever, those things need to be followed up on. It reflects on the Board of Selectmen, who is, in any town, the face, pretty much, of the town. Then you look at the IMA with Hubbardston. It states the town accountant will be in the town of Hubbardston an average of 10 hours per week, but Templeton taxpayers are paying for 38 hours a week. And the accountant was even given an extra $7,500 supposedly to do that extra work when she's already being paid to work 38 hours in Templeton, but yet she's spending 10 of those hours in Hubbardston.
And she gets,
Something just, it has the appearance at the least of not benefiting the town of Templeton. Also, when that happened, when that agreement was done, Templeton taxpayers were asked to increase the hours from the assistant town accountant from 19.5 to 38, equally, effectively doubling her pay, actually a little more. She went from 18 and 1,200 floating to 49,000 and change. Plus the cost of benefits, which on the low side is probably about 25,000 extra beyond that pay. And one reason given for that to happen, for the assistant to be made full-time, is for when the regular accountant is in Hubbardston working, that office can stay open and the work would get done. If you were at or watched the last advisory committee meeting, it was mentioned that the monthly expenditure reports that had been previously agreed on between the Administrative Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee, they would be no later than the 10th of the following month. So February's, you should receive it by March 10th. That has not happened in about 6 months or so. It's been different times, a week past it, 2 weeks. Again, maybe I'm being picky, but when my Board of Selectmen vote on something, and this was done before I was elected to the board, taxpayers should have an expectation that things will be followed and things will be kept up with. The advisory committee, acting as a standing committee representing town meeting when town meeting is not in session, referred to as the town's official fiscal watchdog. That is from the Selectmen Handbook, page 88. Discussed and voted at a recent meeting to ask the Select Board to look at that IMA with Hubbardston regarding accounting, and if it is not for the benefit of Templeton, they recommended to dissolve it. I have yet to see that come up as an agenda item, and I have the email with the date that was sent, if anyone wishes to see that. I believe that is something that if we say we're gonna work with the advisory committee, then we should at least put that on an agenda and discuss it. Again, I believe a board of selectmen, no matter who sits at the table, no matter who the town administrator may be, the town's residents, voters, taxpayers who pay the bills deserve that. And I think this may join projects such as Scout Hall, ambulance receipts, special road stabilization fund creation, the Complete Streets program, the pavement study. It seems like it's just on that list that gets ignored, put in the basket, or just kicked down the road. And if you ever look at the pavement study, you will find out that when it was presented in 2018, the amount of money was estimated $16 million to bring the roads up to standard if all the work was done in that day, and it progressively increases. I think in '21, it's over $20 million. That's something that needs to be addressed, I think, sooner rather than later. And again, you talk to residents, not just in Templeton, in any town, the roads, they're a mess, it's lack of funding, and it's what's on their minds to be fixed.
I agree.
And I believe they deserve it. And that's my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Mike?
That greater list that you have, let's capture that, just in case I didn't write fast enough, to make sure that I've got the same list that you do. Public comment?
No, but we only have till 10 after 7 because we have our meeting to get to.
Okay, 10 after 7.
Yeah,
Roger that.
we're
Understood.
out of here at 10 after 7.
I do have one important one to go through first. Lori?
I can make it very quick.
Yes, please.
I was gonna deal, I can go after it, you know, with my-
Yeah, if we could,
I will.
let Lori
I-
do her public health presentation and then,
This is a
attend
coronavirus
to the
update.
needs of the Phillips and
Okay.
Just very quickly, Carter and I were in on a Mass Department of Public Health phone call today, which will be a weekly thing. This area, still low risk. We have one confirmed. We don't have any presumptive at the moment. We're still doing the basics, hand washing, coughing. Put some space between you, 6 feet, if you're afraid of people, you know, being sick. We have increased availability of testing. They're moving that along. It's increased reporting results. It's electronic. Follow up with a phone call from Epi in Jamaica Plain. They continue to recommend people use the website at mass.gov for the coronavirus information. There's new protocol documents for isolation and quarantine as of today. We don't have a use for them at the moment. Mass DPH is not making recommendations on closings, not of schools, not of anything. It's a use your common sense type of thing. We don't have any cases. I, at this point in time, don't see any need to make a recommendation to stop the senior center from gathering or school functions. Use a little common sense, more cleaning of doorknobs, countertops, things like that. Other than that, I think we're still okay. I'll keep communications open with the school. Anybody is welcome to call me if they have a question. I can direct you to where the answer would be, or if I can answer it, I will. There's really no need to hoard things at the moment. Toilet paper seems to be an issue right now, I'm hearing. But other than that, that's what I have for you. We're staying in touch, communication's open. I'll talk to other departments, keep you guys up to date as soon as we have something.
Great. Thank you for the update. I had just two quick follow-up questions. It's imperative that we remain reactive. Decisions are being made pretty quickly. It was just yesterday that the state, that Governor Baker made the declaration of emergency. I know that we're monitoring that
Yeah.
emergency management side of it. What is the primary notification method that you're advocating for? Are
As
we
far-
using the website, are we using social media?
I've been using the website.
Okay,
We'll use the social media as well. The
okay,
nice thing about our website is we can actually make it stick and stay up.
yep. Perfect, that's all I
And
wanna
we're
make
trying to
sure, when
drive
people watch
anybody-
this, they say, that's great, where do I go to keep that constant level of information?
Okay.
Great,
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Laurie. I was not aware of the time restriction, so I apologize for that. You said, in,
We have a meeting at 7:30.
At
Our
7:30.
meeting is tonight also.
okay. I have short things, I don't know how long theirs is gonna be, we have a couple people that have, things that are gonna take a second, what's your recommendation?
I would encourage you to let Mr. Bishop make his presentation. I think he understands the import of no pun intended,
Okay.
burning through it.
Lynn, Brendis, Christopher, Virginia, are you here?
Yeah,
Do you mind waiting for the fire study? Are you interested in the fire study?
it's okay.
It's okay?
It's okay.
All right, April, you're all right?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. Mr. Bishop, how are you?
Doing well, how are you?
Excellent.
See why we're not showing, there we go. Not
I
rushing much.
apologize for that, I wasn't aware of the sequencing issue.
I didn't either till.
What's going on?
I saw it, yeah.
Who's there?
I noticed.
So while I'm dealing with technology, I'll also talk for a second. Again, my name is Paul Bishop. I'm from the Center for Governmental Research. We're in Rochester, New York, and we were invited to conduct a study for you related to your fire services. And working until my laptop shut down. Yeah, it was.
Unplug
I know
it
what's
now.
going on.
Plug it back in.
I just need to-
Paul's gonna take care of it.
I've noticed.
Thank you, Steve.
It never works when you need it to.
So we have the Cultural Council. Lynn,
Yes.
Bennett, Brendis, Brandis, Christopher, and Virginia, they're not here? I move to appoint Lynn Bennett, Brendis, Bennett, Christopher
That was right.
Portulais,
That's my
Portulais,
display. So,
and
yeah.
Virginia Strahan to the Cultural Council to a term expiring June 30th, 2022. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to appoint Lynn, Brendis, Christopher, and Virginia to the Cultural Council for a term expiring 6/30/2022. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I was wondering if it was a regional committee, because I noticed that the minutes were from Winchendon and the Portolet was from Gardner.
Am I allowed? to
Yes,
speak?
absolutely, please.
So, we're related, clearly, with the same last name. We live next door, too, and we do a lot in Templeton. Like, we go to church in Templeton. My son goes to school in Templeton. So, we're right on the line of Otter River, Templeton. We could walk to Templeton from our house. So, we're in Winchendon, but, you know, we're
Mhm.
Is that your mom?
my mother-in-law, and this is my son. So,
That's why, okay. What are some of the things that cultural council does?
I think they're meeting next for the Narragansett Historical Society tea and garden party.
You good? Okay, with no further discussion on the motion to appoint Lynn, Brandis, Christopher, and Virginia to the Cultural Council with a term expiring 6/30/22. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thanks, Holly. Thank you very much. And we are ready to go.
Ready to go, apologize for that.
Time management, I'm all about it.
So thank you for the opportunity for both select boards to be here tonight and to share with you some of the findings of the report regarding sharing fire and EMS resources between Templeton and Phillipston. The charge of the study was to determine which, if any, elements of the fire and EMS services might be suitable for sharing. There is a kind of lengthy report, about a 50-page report that I'm gonna try and cover in about 12 to 15 minutes to allow time for questions as we go on. So, brief overview of the methodology. We were on site for a series of interviews. We had a lot of follow-up data requests, some give and take back and forth to make sure we're trying to get a full picture. The document you have in front of you still says draft on it because we know we're not perfect. And there were some, when I was in front of the firefighters last night, they had a couple of areas, things like the wage scales got updated and one piece of equipment changed and the job description shifted a little. There's some minor changes we're gonna be making to the report, but where it comes to,
This is a 99% solution.
yeah, where things are today, it's very much reflective of what the final product will be. Just a real quick overview for those who are not familiar with your fire service or the comparison between the two towns. Templeton is obviously larger than Phillipston in population, not so much in land area. You're pretty close there. Your total town budgets range at $9.6 million in Templeton. Phillipston is 4.6. When we talk about the share that goes towards the fire service, Templeton has a slightly larger share of about 7.5% of your budget goes to the fire service compared to 5.4% in Phillipston. We talk about where EMS revenue comes in because as you charge for transports, the goal is that you're able to fund some of your operations. In Templeton, you bring in almost 42% of your budget through your ambulance billings. In Phillipston, with a much lower call volume, it's only about 13%. When we look at the call volume between the two towns, 863 calls per year on average in Templeton. That's a 5-year average. In Phillipston, it's less at 167. When we do a real simple math of the fiscal year 20 fire department budgets over your population, it costs about $89 a year to have a fire service in Templeton and about $139 for Phillipston. When you do that same kind of math with per call basis, it's less expensive to operate a call in Templeton than it is in Phillipston. These are not shocking findings. When it's expensive to have kind of that standing force of people to operate in the two towns. When there's a little bit more utilization in Templeton, it brings the cost down a little bit. Paid staff at the station per week. This is the what your base staffing is. This doesn't take into account the on-call or the per diem that respond to the specific events when they happen. But this is the people who are there. In Phillipston, it's 2 people working 80 hours a week, ready, each working 40, ready to answer the calls. In Templeton, you have a paramedic 24/7, you have the chief, and then you have some per diem filling in there as well. When you look at the calls per population, you're actually about even. When we, about 0.1 calls, or another way of saying this is you have about 106 calls per 1,000 in Templeton and 107 in Phillipston. So your call demand is about equal between the two. Some of the key findings. You already share things. You share your dispatching. You have a strong mutual aid with each other. When there's a fire, when there's a car accident, and you need to work with each other, you do. Both departments are working well with each other. Your mix of calls. The reality is we call them fire departments. They're EMS departments that occasionally respond to fires and rescues. In Templeton, it's about 80% of the calls relate to emergency medical services. In Phillipston, it's a little less, it's about 73%. Templeton has a paid paramedic firefighter on duty at all times. They also have a chief that works 40 hours a week, and they have some other on-call staff for some specific times. Phillipston has a paid EMT firefighter on duty 40 hours a week. They have a second person there at the station right now filled with part-timers. In the near future, that's going to go to a second full-time person. And the goal is they're covering when they feel they have on-call staff less likely to be available. So they're focused mostly It's the 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday timeframe. And both departments use a combination of per diem and our on-call staff to make sure that when the call comes, someone can answer it. I think one of the key things to mention, though, is neither department, and even the two combined, neither department alone meets the on-duty staffing to meet at the essential firefighting response. The federal standard is when you have a burning building, you need to have 4 people on scene before you can go in. 2 people on the inside, 2 people ready to assist them on the outside. It's commonly referred to as the 2 in, 2 out rule. That's your basic that you need, and neither department can do that without having the callmen, as they're referred to, show up on the scene, or mutual aid or automatic aid. Likewise, it's pretty well established science that you need about a dozen people on a scene in order to put a fire out. You need to get people there, and they need to be coming from home, from their jobs, or coming from another community to help put a fire out. Both towns are doing a reasonably good job of funding the capital investments. I know this is kind of dueling for tax dollars. You have a lot of priorities as small communities, but you've been able to make some of the key investments needed. There is an organization called the Insurance Services Office that provides a framework, a report card, as you will, of how fire departments do in relation to being able to provide fire protection to their community. It's a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being the best, 10 being there is no fire department. In Templeton, you're rated at a 6/6X. That has to do with your water supply. So the areas where you have a water supply, you're a 6. Areas without it, you're a 6X. In Phillipston, it's rated at a 9, where they indicate that you do have a fire department, but primarily because there's not an adequate water supply in Phillipston, you're rated very poorly in that area, and that causes higher fire insurance rates. I will talk, I have some recommendations a little bit later we'll talk about. In Templeton, the fire chief is a working chief. He has to respond to calls when they come in while he's there. And in Phillipston, they use a part-time chief that works somewhere between 10 to 20 hours a week to help maintain those administrative activities. The pay scale for both departments is at the low end of the pay range compared to their peers. And that, there's several pages in the report that document, we looked at about 10 peer towns for both communities, so all told was about 20 communities we looked at in the area, and you're both down in that lower quarter. Related to the share of the budget toward the fire department, Templeton's is relatively low compared to your peer groups. Phillipston's was relatively high compared to its peer group, and that has to do with many in its peer group do not have full-time staffing. They just rely on callmen. Looking at the last 5 years, Phillipston's response times have a median of 8 minutes, 48 seconds. Templeton's median response time is a minute 48 quicker at 7 minutes. But when we look at just the hours when Phillipston has their station staff, so that's Monday to Friday, 7 to 3, their response time is equal to Templeton's.
Awesome.
All right. The Phillipston Fire Department is well located in the town. Their station meets the needs as they currently operate, but if they were to ever look at trying to go a 24-hour-a-day operation, or even in some sort of emergency situation where you wanted to keep people there, there's really no spot to sleep at their station. The Templeton Fire Department, your headquarters station is not at modern fire service standards. There's a number of kind of deficiencies that relate to firefighter safety, hazards that they have to encumber going up and down stairs, and we outlined some of that in the report, so there are areas for improvement there. And the electronic record keeping for both fire departments could improve in areas of training and maintenance, areas related to inventory and record and the call responses and such. They're doing pretty well at. So I'm going to just at 1 second on this call type distributions. As I mentioned before, the majority of your calls are EMS calls. So if you look in the middle, about the fourth row down, 03 EMS calls, 73% of Templeton, 60% of Phillipston. We add that up with the accident-related, which also involve an EMS response, and the mutual aid, and that's where we got those numbers of roughly 80% for Templeton and 70+ percent for Phillipston. Fires are rare. When we total up all of the different fire types, it really only accounts for about 5% of your calls. It's just a map showing the calls for service by town. So this is the Phillipston map, and I'll make sure that you get that in a format that you can print, a larger format. But this ink splot is a 4-minute drive time, which is equivalent to an 8-minute response from the caller's perspective. So it takes about 2 minutes to process a 911 call, about a minute for the vehicle to get rolling, and then 4 minutes to get there and a minute to get to the front door. So that's roughly an 8-minute response time. The majority of calls in Phillipston are within that 8-minute response from their headquarters. When we look at Templeton, if you staffed both stations, we would have that same response, that the majority of your calls do fall into that. However, your staffing are generally at Station 2, the headquarters station up in the Baldwinsville area. That leads to a longer response time as you head to the southern part of the town. So one of the thoughts is, as you look towards long-term planning, if you were to choose to create a single fire station, I would locate it south of where you are right now, of where your headquarters.
The central area, Templeton Center area.
You wouldn't want to go, either halfway between your two stations would really give you some really good coverage.
Roger that. Yes, sir.
Quick context for the options: you're in a rural area. We're never going to have quite the same service level as somebody who's in a suburban setting or an urban setting. And people live out here, also they don't have the same type of noise, the same type of physical environment around them. There's only so many people who are available to get involved in the fire service, either because there are not only so many people physically able, or their work requirements and such make it difficult for them to get involved. And the National Fire Service is continuously increasing their standards, which drives the fact that you have to have capital investment continuously. So some of the options, and again, these are all spelled out with a little bit more detail in the report. The big thing that I want to start off with is I don't see that there's an immediate benefit of merging the two departments unless there's some way of getting a dedicated funding stream that allows them to tap into additional monies either through grants or being a fire district. Other than that, there's really, the two departments are operating relatively well, particularly in the way that they can be funded in this community. Likewise, there's little benefit in sharing a chief between the two departments because of how the current setups are. The current chief position in Templeton is stretched pretty thin, particularly with the acknowledgement that he has to answer calls on a regular basis, and the arrangement that Phillipston has is working for them right now. It'd be difficult for me to argue that there's a lot of benefit in upsetting that apple cart. There would be some benefit in having on-call or per diem firefighters jointly appointed between the two departments. This allows, when there is a call that comes in, if you're able to staff an ambulance with one person in one town and the other town has another person available, you might be able to share. And also, likewise, the training on the fire apparatus. If there's a need, if you have one of the full-timers out on vacation, you're having trouble filling in those shifts, it gives you a bigger pool of people to pull from. Both departments could build on recruitment efforts for youth and women. Both are doing things for that. But it is, we talk about that as being areas, this is a fire service challenge across the country of making it so it's different from what it has been traditionally, that, you know, the father and the uncle are the firefighter, and they convince the son and the nephew to get involved.
Right.
Well, let's also get the niece and the daughter involved, and let's make sure that everyone feels welcome at the fire station. And how do you get that next generation? Because it's not just a family thing anymore. And we need to, there's a barrier in every public safety service. We need to try and break that down everywhere. It's not just here, but it's a recommendation to make here. Involve other employees in the town to participate as callmen or to assist on the fire ground in non-hazardous situation. This is something Phillipston already does with the DPW staff during the day. I didn't hear that in Templeton, but that's something that is hopefully a relatively low bar to.
You have a CERT? Do you have a CERT team, CERT? No? I was gonna ask that question, Paul, because I know our CERT team does participate as
Okay.
like that. Chief, I don't know how you'd characterize that, like not first, not the second, like your per diem, but your third line of defense, like making sure that all the support, water and things like that. I just wondered if we looked at that aspect of it. It's like that. Third line of
CERT to
defense.
us is another organization. They come in to supplement us or the police or the town when needed. But they're run through emergency management. They're not under my purview.
Okay.
Couple of other community engagement efforts, Chamber of Commerce, Citizens Academies, both ways to try and make sure the public understands what happens at the fire service. The question of the pay scale, $1 an hour raise for every position. In Templeton is an additional $19,000 a year. In Phillipston, it's $8,500 a year. Just so you understand, as you're approaching your budget season, if you were to give everyone a $1 an hour raise, that's what your impact would be. And we have a little more explanation of where that puts you in relation to your neighbors. Again, I'm being cognizant of time, making sure I hit all the important stuff. The fire departments should consider, rather than purchasing a new software system, expanding the use of their existing software modules. So both departments are using slightly different portfolio of programs, but rather than try and start with something new, use the additional modules that are available to tack onto the systems you have in place. Billing for non-EMS calls is an option, but it has not been shown to bring substantial returns, particularly with the call volumes that your two communities have. You might have some slight additional revenue over the course of the year, but there's also the administrative cost that gets tied into it. You'd have to, the cost benefit, I would say, is erring towards not bringing a lot of benefit to either of the two towns. But again, there is some benefit, so if you want to pursue it, you can. I talked about relocating from 2 stations to a central location in Templeton. Improving the ISO rating. There are some steps for Templeton related to the water system, tracking, training, and fire prevention program that would allow you to lower your rating to get a better rating. Likewise in Phillipston, improving on the map that you have and testing your draft point would allow you to improve your rating as well. And the question about Phillipston, whether or not to continue with Athol for ALS or use Phillipston, when we look at this next map, you see that that purple area is an 8-minute drive from Athol, and they really cover cover more locations than a unit coming out of.
It's brown versus purple.
Brown versus purple.
Got it.
Gives about 2 minutes for questions.
You can go first.
You guys have any questions? John?
No, we had met before, and I think we had a lot of questions then, and answered them. I don't have any new ones to, I mean, was a pretty comprehensive study. But, you know, like you're saying, like this last one, for an ambulance, it might be easier for Athol to come over. No, it's obviously easier.
Chief, you have any questions?
No, we spoke at length last night.
Great, all right. So the part about the essential firefighting response was very interesting to me. What is the criteria for having that? Is it just your full-timers? Is it, no, okay. It's the consolidated effort to respond. Okay, and you need 4.
Well, so to do a 2 in, 2 out, to be able to effect a rescue and really start fire suppression activities, that's where that 4
Right.
comes in. To be able to put a fire out and contain it to the room where it starts, you need to have about a dozen people on scene within 10 minutes of the alarm. And that's really hard to do in rural areas.
Okay. I mean, would you say it's unachievable with the resources that you saw from both towns, with consolidation or not? It seems like a tough.
So one of the keys, and I do mention it, is the use of automatic aid, which is something that is done right now. So when you have that phone call for that 1%, 2%
Right.
of calls that are
Exactly.
really fires,
Yeah.
they're already calling for the additional help right from the start.
Right.
They're calling for additional
Because both
person
people-
power to the
everyone
scene
understands
and
what it
water.
is.
Yeah, because everyone understands that those are really those high-risk, low-frequency events.
Right.
And it's already part of the protocol to request that additional help right at the start to get it coming. Again, and if you look at the numbers, it's maybe 10 times a year that you would even do it on dispatch in Templeton, and 2 or 3 times a year in Phillipston at dispatch, where you think you have that fire, you need that extra help coming. Sometimes it gets canceled.
The 2 in, 2 out is actually, it's a little misleading too. That's 2 firefighters out, ready to go in. That doesn't account for your pump operator that needs to supply the water for the guys in. Doesn't account for the command position to make your decision and help. So you're actually looking, your initial, when you're looking for 2 in, 2 out, to actually be able to go in the building, you're actually looking at 5 or 6 guys you need, not 4.
I understand. Is that a hurdle to overcome for grants or otherwise? Is that like a ceiling or anything? Does that limit us because we don't fall under, you said that's a national,
So
a national,
It's an NFPA standard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So even a town like such as Athol doesn't always meet that standard, so that's why we rely on mutual aid so much.
Yeah.
And Chief can attest to that as well. We couldn't do it without mutual aid, which we use all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Other questions? You're not going with them, but you guys go if you're pressed for time, and we don't have to stop Paul. Are there any other questions?
I would just, if I were to the board, Evan would say to you, as we always do in these presentations, if you have questions over the next week or so, if you can get those to us, we'll get you the answers and then take that draft stamp off the report.
Right. As I said, there are a couple of minor revisions that I've been made aware of and will make.
Great. Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you for the presentation. The statistics are always, we get statistics, but to see them in a different light on what they mean, especially when you align them with peer statistics, whether they hurt or whether they don't. Good night, John.
And I agree too, there's a lot of good information in here.
Right.
Thank you.
I didn't have any other questions. No?
I'm just recalling when we had a fire where Jeannie's Lunch used to be, it was up the hill, and they had to call for mutual aid, the CERT team help, but they had to pump water from that pond down the street up the hill. It was one of our officers that handled the dogs.
Now, Phillipson's, one of their limiting factors is that they don't have an adequate water source. You said that earlier on in the study. What's that limiting factor? They just,
They don't, they
Distance
have
between
no
hydrants?
they have no municipal water supply.
okay. I wasn't aware of that.
So what they do have, spread throughout the town are, what are referred to as dry hydrants. So they're, or pump draft points really. So they have whether it's a pond or a stream, where they have a fixed, looks like when you're driving down the road, it looks a little bit like a hydrant, because it's got that connection, but it's attached to a pipe that goes down and into the water. In order for that to count as a water source, they have to pump out of it and prove that they can get water out of it, essentially 12 months a year, or if not, identify that this is a draft, point for us only when we have these kind of conditions.
Thank you that we thank God that we won't have a lot of fires.
I actually was, when you put the numbers up there, the 1%, and you had CO2 response, CO2 detectors responses, that was 1%, and then our fire number also 1%. And I wasn't aware of that. Did you do any social media look, or we have a photographer that goes to all of them, so I see a lot of their responses. Maybe I don't think that Templeton is burning down every day, but I do see a lot of their responses, whether it's motor vehicle accidents or otherwise. But I wasn't aware that it was basically 1% of. Now that's 1% of calls, correct?
1% of the calls, yeah.
Okay.
Those calls also are rising. You gotta remember, carbon monoxide detectors is a relatively new science. Every year, those calls go up, be it a false alarm because people don't know to change batteries, or that their detector is only good for 7 years.
I agree.
Right?
Yep.
So we get those types of calls, but those calls, I'm not gonna say they're gonna jump by huge numbers, but that 1% easily could turn to 2 or 3%
Yeah.
of our calls within the next 5 years.
And they also go off in losing power too,
They
carbon
do-
monoxide detectors.
They do not go off of losing power, you're hearing a no power alarm on it, is what you're hearing.
So, looking at the call
Battery alarms
type
and
distributions, do
battery.
you do any kind of look on, are there conflicting calls? So from a study perspective, if I'm looking at different calls, if you have a smaller fire response team, if they're going out for a detector, let's say they're gonna go drive all the way to it in the extreme, town limits or something, is there any kind of statistic where you have conflicting call types? Does that make sense? Am I describing that accurately?
When you have calls that come in clustered, is that what you're?
Correct.
Okay.
Is
I
that
did
a
not
factor?
do
Okay.
that analysis, just with the average of 860 calls a
Okay.
year. We're talking
There's not a lot of overlap.
2 or 3
Okay.
a day on average.
Yep.
So yes, you can have that overlap, because if you have that ambulance transport, you're out of the community
Right.
for.
And then they have to
tied
call
up
for
for an
mutual
hour
aid
and
to
a
cover
half,
that,
right.
right?
We
Okay.
probably have, on the average of 12 to 15 overlap calls like you're talking about
Mhm.
a year. He uses a lot of averages, we average 2 calls, we average 3 calls a day type thing for our calls. But it's hard to go on averages, because that's an average. We'll go 2 or 3 days with no calls, and we've had a high of 15 calls in a day. So, it's really, the average is good to say you have an average of this call, but it's not your typical day in Templeton that way.
Yep.
So, we do have our days that the crews are responding for a second ambulance call, or coming back to get an engine from Hayward Hospital, because they just left the hospital dropping a patient off.
Yep.
The timeframes there, to say it was a call that happened at the same time, an ambulance call in Templeton takes us about an hour and 20 minutes.
Interesting,
Or
okay.
so, hour and a half maybe.
From the time of the call to when
from the
they
time of
actually
the
come
call
back from the
until
hospital.
we actually get back, depending on the type of call. We also do, if we transport anywhere besides Gardner or Athol, so if we transport to Leominster or Worcester with a more critical patient, or if they wanna go there, because we can't tell them no, we call back. I try to call back more crews to keep a crew in. We try to staff that second ambulance, because now, you know, a call to Worcester is a 45-minute drive there, a 45-minute drive back, plus any time to get paperwork done in the hospital and the time in the scene, you're looking at a 2.5-hour call. I've lost crews to Boston before. We had a patient that had to go to Children's. We could not arrange, it was not an emergency call, but we could not arrange for another ambulance to come and help us on that day. We had to go take that. I lost that crew for 8 hours for a Boston call.
Call Gamma. I certainly took a lot of notes. Capital items, just a little bit of like feedback going back through from our perspective. The capital items that you saw, I at least can say that there's been discussion on them. Like you said, the self-contained breathing apparatus. Chief Dickey's been working on that for a few years now. And he just sometimes he gets full support with it. Sometimes we say, can we buy you, half the bottles that you need for this year? So some of those capital items, like the software that you were talking about, I think we could probably have good discussions about that in like the things from that the study gives us as like a right of way. Like, oh, that's great. That's something that we are working on, so we can get better about that.
Again, the trouble is, and it's no disrespect to him, but he's been working on this since July.
Mm-hmm.
Changes have happened.
Yep.
Even from his report.
That's what I thought.
We're already streamlining our software process, adding a different software so we can get rid of other software, because this one does more for us for either training or documentation. We're already making these changes. They were already talked about when he came, but we didn't have the funding or whatnot.
Right.
We got the funding and we were able to do it during the process.
Yeah.
So.
Now, you're talking about synchronizing the software or just a better type? Like you were saying, use the enhanced modules. Does that help us work better together?
It's, instead of having 5 or 6 different things that do one thing apiece, find the software that does multiple things.
I understand,
and use
okay.
that. And that's what we are headed for.
All right.
I have one software that can.
A little bit different.
One software that we're moving to that can do my fire reporting, my EMS reporting. It's gonna do my vehicle tracking information. It can track my training. Instead of using 3 different softwares that did that all before, I'm now able to start moving towards one. So it's less training time. It's a better version of what we need to do. It's something that was not available a year ago, 2 years ago, but now is, because the company that has it upgraded their product.
Cool. Any other questions? Carter? Mr. Bishop, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Very nice job.
Thanks for working with us on our technology.
Via email, so I can put it up on our website.
Sure.
The PowerPoint,
Thank you. Appreciate it, Adam.
Two different documents.
Before I move on, did we have, Bob, I know you wanted to speak during the, were there any other public comments? Kind of between some of the business that we had left, it's like both. Do you want to go now, or do you want me to, I can do the EDIC appointments too. Okay. Come on up. I'll jump back into the agenda as we have it.
Oh, this is
The
my
what?
notes. I said I need a flexible one. Those are just my notes.
Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening, Robert May, 137 Shady Lane. I'm here speaking as a citizen tonight. And I came here because, as you know, you've released the fiscal '21 budget, and I was looking through, and I've noticed a couple items, and as it seems, Mr. Bennett has done. I've been looking through and backtracking and seeing where things go, and I came across this item that just goes along with something that I've been, kind of reiterating over and over again, and it just falls right in play. But it goes, in the Personal Policy Handbook under G, annual performance goals, merit reviews, it references the phrase budgetary constraints 4 separate times throughout the description. Subject to budgetary constraints, within town budgetary constraints, within town budgetary constraints, and based on the town's budgetary constraints. I see the fiscal '21 budget coming in, 6.8% increase in the school, for $454,000 increase at Templeton, and the town's budgeting increase is $220,423, as I see it. So as I've laid out, we have roughly $675,000 in proposed increases, with total new resources listed for fiscal '21 budget as $385,000. $385,000, that includes the new growth tax levy increase of 2.5%, the UGGA, and the excise. That's everything.
Right.
Based on some information that I found from DSL in last year's budget book, it appears that in 2018, the Templeton employee costs were $4.3 million, roughly. The school reported
That's with the retirement, with
it
fully
didn't
loaded?
specify, it
Okay.
just, that's why I just said,
Yep, I understand.
as it's listed. It won't really matter with my point.
Okay.
The school reported anticipated salaries of $12.2 million for fiscal '20. A 2% increase in these funds, just a 2% annual increase in these funds, wipes out our entire new growth figure.
Yep.
But yet I see the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, continuing with CBAs that give out 2% and higher rates on the health insurance side. 3% on the officers and so forth. And then for town employee, the
Merit
towns.
raises, yeah.
And on the town side, the merit raises, I'm seeing 12 and 3/4, 10, 9, 7, all the while talking about an override to get a police officer back on the force that we've lost. I really think you guys, the BOS and the administration, need to take a lot more responsibility to get the budget balanced across the board before you bring it to the taxpayer. Because I don't think it's fair coming to the taxpayer, $300 and some odd thousand upside down and saying, you figure it out. Which is virtually where we are, and that's what I have to say. Thank you very much, and have a nice
I
night.
appreciate it, thanks, Bob. Okay, any other public comments? All right, I had Jeff and Bob, and they've got lots of notes from them. Okay, moving on in the agenda, we've taken care of the Cultural Council. April, actually, you don't really need to come up for that. What's that?
I did write that.
Oh, she's on the phone?
No, I sent her a message.
Okay, she's good, okay, perfect. So, when we did the work with the EDIC committee last time, we assumed wrong when we thought that the EDIC organizes itself. Jeff actually found the language, which is not only mirrored in our own town language, but it's mirrored with the state language. So this evening, we have the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority for your chair and your co-chair. And you'll remember that your appointments, I think, expire in June. So we have time to revisit if it doesn't 100% work. And I know that we have our first meeting, not the 13th. 17th? Yeah, St. Patrick's Day.
You're bringing the beer.
The green beer?
You are? Nice.
Well, I mean, it's St. Patrick's Day, come on. So in light of that, I move to appoint Amanda Murray as Chair of the Economic Development Industrial Corporation to a term ending on June 30th, 2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none on the motion to appoint Amanda Murray as the Chair of the EDIC Council to a term ending 6/30/2020. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. I move to appoint April Cover as Vice Chair of the Economic Development Industrial Corporation to a term ending 6/30/2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none on the motion to appoint April Cover as Vice Chair of the EDIC to a term ending 6/30/2020. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All right, that takes care of our business for appointments and vacancies. Designation of chair.
Under 5B, we
Peter,
did have a potential additional appointee to the EDIC.
Oh, okay, Mr. Haley. Okay, perfect. Did we get that in there? Oh, there it is. I move to appoint Mr. Haley. Nice to meet you, Mike Curry. I move to appoint Peter Haley to the Economic Development Industrial Corporation to a term expiring on 6/30/2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Very nice.
Peter, what's that?
I just said very nice.
Yeah. Peter, anything? Any words? Okay. And hearing no further discussion on the motion to appoint Peter Haley to the EDIC for a term expiring on 6/30/2020. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Awesome, thank you, Mr. Haley.
That's 6 members now for 7 out of 7. 6 out of 7. You just need that low income one.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
That was yours, right?
Yeah.
Congrats.
You want it?
Thank
Oh, I've got one
We
too.
got copied.
First there was none, and now there are 6.
Yay.
We're rolling.
Yeah.
And I said in an email to everybody on the EDIC committee that we would have a committee, our first meeting's agenda set pretty soon, if it's not already. I know the meeting's scheduled, but as
For
far
the
as an agenda.
17th?
I think we have, I gotta backtrack on some minutes.
And we have put together a package.
Thank you, April. You're welcome. Have a good night. Glad to see you.
Thank you. You should have in your packet the meeting minutes for February 22nd of this year and none of the executive sessions. So we just have one set of minutes.
February 26th.
26.
26, what did I say, 22nd?
Yeah.
26th. Apologize. I move to approve the minutes of February 26th, 2020 as presented in your packet under 4A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion, clarifications, or corrections? Hearing no further clarifications or corrections on the motion to approve the minutes of February 26th, 2020, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Got them. Peter. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the Vittler and entertainment license. I actually looked it up and that's the proper way to say it.
Vittler?
Vittler.
Vittler?
What's that?
Carl?
No, it just struck me.
Just
Sounds
comes out of
too
the
much
mouth.
like
You gotta pronounce the, yeah.
Victular.
So the C is not pronounced?
Yeah.
How many websites did I go to?
Yeah, for the old Brits, I don't
Vittler.
know.
I go with entertainment, the heck with it.
Those guys.
So you have the license application for Crows on the Common from Karen Osterberg and Terry Forger. Holly, any showstoppers or anything there?
No, we have
Everything's in-
everything in
Great.
And those
They
will
had
get-
reached out to me today and asked about
Yeah.
that, so I said
And they'll
usually
hold on
probably.
to those till their, like, liquor license is approved and send it all out together when we get that.
Okay.
They went for a liquor license?
Yes,
Believe we already,
last meeting.
yeah.
Bloody Mary breakfast.
Hasn't been
They do,
requested for a
but-
safety inspection yet, so.
They can't open until.
It's a special.
So you can't sit on these.
Okay.
They need them.
Don't believe so.
I don't know.
All right, I'll figure that out.
So
Uh,
are
the-
we gonna
the-
contact?
The clarification over here was that they don't have to have their liquor license to open, but they do have to have their common vic and their entertainment license on premises
Yes,
to do those. So I was
We'll
just
get those
reminding
out.
Holly that we can't hold on to those.
right.
So those will be sent out
Yep.
upon your
Gotcha.
approval here tonight.
Rather than
Okay.
wait till all together.
And you still needed to be consulted with for one of them?
Well, no, with their liquor license, it needs to go through the building department and myself for a safety inspection,
Okay.
so.
But
I
it's
mean, I'm
typically
not
we
seeing
approve
any
it and then
issue
it
with
goes
it,
to them.
but when I did my final inspection of the building, they didn't have tables and chairs, so I would need to go in there to see their egress paths and so forth.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
Just a question. I know there'd been discussion around parking on that. Has this been before the planning board?
I'm not sure they've been, I'm not aware of that.
I
I
know
don't-
they went through.
I'll
that.
double check and advise the board, but I do not believe it required any planning board approval.
Okay.
For restaurants, I believe it.
It was
But we,
grandfathered as a.
we
that
did
use.
talk, and it was, not surprising, but they had some support, areas, a butter support for that. So when I asked the question, I know that, that was something that you were interested in about parking. I asked the question.
Yeah.
And, they knew that they were gonna have some challenges with that, as Country Mischief had challenges. However, Country Mischief didn't have 100 seating capacity to it, so that's a point that they well made.
Yeah.
We'll get
I
that
know-
explanation for the board, put it
Okay.
in the weekly.
Okay. I know, Jeff brought it up in terms of, available land and otherwise, and I know that they were interested in discussing it. And just in my research, that a lot of the land that isn't central to that area, it's labeled as the common. So that would be a concern that I would have. I think it's gonna wind up touching multiple boards when we start talking about what is actually possible.
There's a deed restriction on it,
Right.
but the land must be maintained.
Yep.
I mean, and please don't quote this exactly, but in its current appearance.
Mhm.
Now, I'm sure that it had trees on it at the time, and we can all agree the trees have probably been cut down.
Mhm.
And I don't know what steps, if any, the town took when it realigned that, but a sale for a parking lot would most likely not
Right.
be in keeping with its current appearance. And we can get that deed for you if you'd like.
Okay. And I'm not even sure that was their, when we were discussing that, I don't think that was their 100% solution to basically, what did Joni Mitchell say? Pay paradise and put up a parking lot? Yeah.
They would consider it to add some parking. And that particular section of the common is not under the restrictions of, say, the piece of land in front of the Templeton Center Fire Station, at least the copy of the deed that I have, that's in longhand writing and is a challenge to read, but
Yeah.
It's a different deed, and it uses different phrasing, but I think that, you know, the operative phrase was something like, that the land had to be maintained in its current appearance.
It
And
is
we'll get that out for you in the next few days.
Okay. I move to approve the common villa and live entertainment licenses for Crows on the Common, both to expire on December 31st, 2020.
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none on the motion to approve the common vittler and live entertainment licenses for Crows on the Common, both to expire on December 31st, 2020. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, next item on the agenda is the town clerk digital scan vote tabulators under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, subsection 34. Do we have any information on that, or are we just gonna go?
There's a motion in here for
Okay,
your
yep.
consideration. I would just remind you, it was in a administrator's report at one point. One of the reasons for delaying this was we wanted to get past the adoption of the federal Voting Act. I don't remember the exact name, but basically the money that is allocated to states to help provide a more secure election. We have been informed that as long as we made that purchase post that date, which it took us till early February to sort that out, the vote was effective December 31 of 2019. So I don't know that the money is gonna go to the state for machines. I don't know that the state's going to make it available for machines, but by having delayed this, we now have the possibility of a reimbursement out there. I don't wanna tell you that for certain, but that is one of the reasons why we delayed that purchase, to try to position us, should the monies be available for that.
That was a capital item. Jeff, that was a capital item, wasn't it? The voting machines, I forget how much there was.
There was $20,000 set aside
Okay.
for this. Depending upon, the quote actually came in a little bit less than the initial estimate. That's not normally the way it goes on capital items. And then we were able to apply the trade-in. So it came in within budget.
Okay. I'll throw the motion out there, we're gonna have discussion. I move to discontinue using AccuVote's ballot scanning and tabulation voting equipment and to use ImageCast voting equipment beginning with September 1st, 2020 state primary and all elections and primaries, federal, state, and local from that date forward.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the AccuVote to ImageCast voting equipment?
Seems like we have plenty of time to get used to it, and 120 days in advance, we're in good time. To train and set it up and learn it and.
Any further discussion? Okay, on the motion to discontinue using AccuVote and start using ImageCast, beginning with the September 1st state primary in 2020, in all elections and primaries, federal, state, and local from that date forward. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Probably should have done that one for the fire study before we left, but that's all right.
Oh.
We were trying to catch up. Okay, next item on the agenda was the fire study. We already had the presentation, we had questions. We can have any discussion on the motion. I move to accept the fire study report and refer it to workshop for further consideration.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Kind of says it all, we'll move it to workshop and be able to say, okay, now what? Look into the recommendations and what we can do with that information.
Yeah, there's a lot. A lot to be concerned about, that's for sure.
Hearing no more discussion on the motion to accept the fire study and refer it to workshop for further consideration. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, next agenda item, we have 58-day Mill Drive, waiver of right, the waive right of first refusal to Templeton. Okay, we have another, letter from CHAPA that, current owner of affordable property under chapter 40B. This is to inform you the owner's intent to sell the affordable unit. The unit is located at 58 Day Mill Drive and is part of Day Mill Townhouse as a chapter 40B project for which Citizens Housing and Planning Association, or CHAPA, serves as the monitoring agent. So this is, the right of first refusal to Templeton, for the amount of $159,100. We do not have our trust set up yet, nor our administrative, which we are working on. That is an initiative that we are working on. We are making progress in terms of trying to figure out how to get the money in line, and then the administration thereof of it. And I think both of you saw the letter that I had sent there asking. We did get positive feedback to say, yeah, we'd like to help you.
I have a quick question. Can they go directly to CHAPA to buy this property?
They already own the property.
No, the people, if there's anybody interested in this property,
Mhm.
even though it's not town-owned yet, can they go to CHAPA and say they're interested? Like, if we read the sale commences March 4th, 2020, and ends June 2nd, 2020, for that particular price.
They could, but what CHAPA would do is just refer them to the broker and the owner.
Yeah. Would they still get it at the CHAPA price?
If they make an offer and it's accepted, and it can be sold within the deed restricted price, yes.
Yeah, 'cause I know that my daughter just won a CHAPA lottery, so I didn't know if this is in a lottery. Like, they have lotteries for these things.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, trying to create.
Okay, so it's
up
not
here.
created, but,
CHAPA is a umbrella organization for these efforts. And there's a possible administrator for the kind of lottery that we're talking about trying to create, yes.
but it still can, if they go through the broker,
Yes,
be considered a CHAPA home.
yes.
'Cause you'd hate for people to lose out, 'cause the town isn't ready
So
yet.
let me just see if I can try to make some sense of this to you.
Yes.
Was the $149,000?
$159,100.
So if somebody who is of low to moderate income
Income eligible.
makes an offer of $159,000, and they can get financed, they can get the unit. Because if the person selling the unit has an offer of $169,000, they're not gonna keep the money. That difference comes to us. The unfortunate piece is it gets lost in the marketplace. So the owners have no incentive to sell it to someone for a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
So the incentive is, if we can connect a income qualified person who is financially qualified to buy it, that's where things intersect, and the best arrangement is for everyone. And if you have someone that's interested, by all means, have them contact CHAPA, have them contact our office, and we'll get them connected directly to the broker.
That's good to know.
Okay?
I agree. I move to waive the right of first refusal on 58 Day Mill Drive.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
What's the last one?
But it's still a possibility for people out there that are watching on cable, that if you contact the town office, they can point you in the right direction if there's a need.
I would suggest the town selectman's office as just any
Town selectmen's
town
office. Thank you, Patrick.
Click on our names. We get it. We get the email.
Or just
We
send us an
respond.
email, yeah, absolutely.
On the motion, made and seconded to move, to waive the right of first refusal on 58 Day Mill Drive. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, and, let's see. last on new business is the Lions Club Easter egg hunt at the bandstand. The Templeton Lions Club would like to request the use of town common on April 11th, 2020 for our annual Easter egg hunt at the bandstand area. The time would be 8:30 in the morning to 11:30 in the morning. We understand the town requests an insurance policy. We will have that forwarded to the town. Any questions, please contact us. Steve Heeman. Hemen?
Yeah. I didn't know.
And the certificate of liability was received. I move to approve the Lions Club use of the town common bandstand for their annual Easter egg hunt on Sunday, April 11th, 2020, from approximately 8:30 to 11:30 in the morning.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and, second?
That involves chocolate, that's good stuff.
That's awesome. The motion, made and seconded, to approve the Lions Club use for the Easter egg hunt on Sunday, April 11th. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay. All right, we're moving on to old business. Under old business, I have, setting a workshop date for a discussion, not a joint discussion, but a dual discussion for way ahead for the program for Scout Hall and a proposed relocation for Veterans Park, from 4 Elm Street to, Otter River, the Otter River Park. So, Mr. Terenzini, I know we had talked about this in terms of just setting a date. Do you recall what we said for a date?
We had not, one suggestion had been to put it on the April, I think, 3, perhaps, workshop. Because
April 3.
generally by then you only have budget cleanup items.
You said April 3?
Is that a Wednesday?
No, April 1st is a Wednesday.
That's
Okay, then
Okay.
April 1st. Because we have the other
That is a
workshop
workshop
that we
day.
need to
Yep.
try to move.
Okay. You guys wanna have, that workshop discussion?
Well,
And
originally, I believe, February 26th? A couple meetings ago, we were gonna have it at this business meeting, March 11th.
No. Are we prepared to do it tonight? I
Well,
mean, as a workshop I mean, this is a business meeting, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, do you mind moving it to April 1st?
Can it wait that long?
Well, I mean, I think it can wait. I'm certainly not, I don't have any of my I have some of the materials with me.
Steve too, Steve's here.
Fine by me.
Okay.
no, okay, that's
Okay,
fine.
all right.
I
don't
did
think
come
we need a
prepared.
motion for that. Say again?
I did come prepared.
You did? Yeah, I did not, I'm sorry. I don't think we need a motion to move it to, we just place it on the agenda for April 1st workshop.
So April 1st would be any remaining budget warrant items and these 2 items then.
Okay. Okay, that's it for old business. Under board and staff member comments, Carter, you had a,
Yes, this actually kind of ties back into Mr. May's comments and what I've been trying to get across all along, which is that I did not believe anyone would be horribly disappointed in the school's final assessment. The finance committee for the school committee met last night, and the report that I got this afternoon in my conversation with the superintendent was that the proposed assessment for next year was in the neighborhood of $228,000. This is not at the 2.5% that we had hoped for, but it is pretty close to 2.5% overall for education, and a little bit out of the overlay. Bottom line is that the budget will do everything that we propose to do in the budget, accommodate Monty Tech, and meet this request if in fact that comes to fruition. Now, the reason that the superintendent has, and I were talking, was he has asked that his appearance currently scheduled for March 16 be extended to March 23, so that he can go from the finance committee of the school to the full committee to get that budget formally voted by all 8 members of the board and give us that certified final vote. I will say that we already had April 23 on the agenda in case we needed it as a snow date. Now, I will certainly hope it won't snow Monday night, but we could do one of two things.
March. You
My
said April.
apologies, March. I got the numbers right, but
Yeah,
The 16th, so the 23rd was the snow date, got it.
23rd was the snow date. Now, we certainly hope it won't snow this coming Monday night, but we could just simply move March 16, notify Monty Tech, and if they can be here, they could be here, because frankly, with these 2 school districts, the number's the number. And we've already given you Monty Tech's budget, and it's voted, it's past the draft stage. So I need to know if the board wants to move everything from the 16th to the 23rd, or if they want to add the 23rd, or if they're open to
Excuse me.
accommodating the superintendent's.
so would that
Request.
be 2 meetings, the 17th, the 16th and the 23rd?
I'm
'Cause
suggesting
there
you
was
just simply move this
a-
coming Monday
everything-
night
Okay, yeah, I agree.
to the 23rd
Yeah.
of March.
Right, I don't want two Monday nights, that's a lot.
And then you would have your business meeting on the 25th, but that's already scheduled.
Is that all right with you, sir?
Hey, let's have 3 meetings, I don't care.
Yeah, right.
No, March 23rd, that's
23rd, 23rd, please.
Done.
Yeah, if we can do that, great.
And I do believe you will be pleased with the final number, as I've been telling you.
Hey.
Or not disappointed. I think the phrase, I started out saying I think you'll be pleased with the budget, and then I adjusted it, and I should stay adjusted.
Yeah,
And
'cause
I-
that's
I-
surprise is
I don't think you'll be horribly disappointed. It's probably a better way to put it.
Barring any coronavirus recall.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a
That's
bad
a
point to me.
possibility.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Terrenzini?
That's all I have for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Terry, do you have any comments this evening?
Do I feel like it? I always have a comment, but I never say it. I think I did a little thinking about the AMI smart meters. I know that's been up for conversation.
Sure.
Whether, and I've come to the conclusion, a couple conclusions through personal experience. So one conclusion I came to is, in the past, we've been very concerned with what's going in the ground and in the lakes and in the streams, and it is a good idea because the studies, and it isn't new enough about G5 and radio waves, to keep an eye on it. And it may not impact us so much out here, except if you're immunosuppressed. But in the big cities, when they're collective in a spot, that could be a problem. So, I'm not worried, but I would, I've come to the conclusion it's something that we should pay attention to, just like we pay attention to what goes in the ground. What's it gonna do to our atmosphere? And the second thing, it was pointed out that we haven't seen, or we may not see any, monetary value or feedback for a few years. And I can understand why, and I can also, these are my own thoughts, see how it can make a savings back to the consumer. Because right now, if you do the brunt of your electric work between after 9 o'clock at night or before 9 o'clock in the morning, you're not using the peak power. So you get a discount already. So for a housewife, I do my laundry after 9 o'clock at night or before 9 in the morning, just, you know, if I have something in between, fine, but I try to gear my peak usage at my house early in the morning or after 9 o'clock when possible to save. But my son got me this smartwatch, and if you're talking about smart pack, smart meter, however you want to say it, they will be able to offer you feedback on how you can save on your electric bill. It's just in keeping with the current smart trends. You know, this thing, I just got it yesterday and set it up, but it's not gonna tell me my sleep cycle for a week. It tracks your sleep, your blood pressure, your workout, anything you want, it syncs to your phone, you know, so it's just to me, I've never spoken with Mr. Driscoll, and he could, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can see where he might be going with this.
Thank you. Jeff, anything else?
Yes, I have a couple of member comments. I will reference something that actually kinda mentioned when he did the initial budget presentation. And this is in reference to creating a special road stabilization fund. It is a special purpose, and it's connected to, one way to fund it is a special override. Looking at the pavement study that was presented to the board in the Board of Selectmen in 2018, and it was, I believe it was paid for out of Chapter 90 money. But using our average funding source to do any road work, it's about 330,000, give or take, from our Chapter 90 or road money that we get from when you pay gas tax.
I think that's
The
about what it
backlog,
is this year. We got our notice for what it is this year.
the backlog of all the work that needs to bring our roads up to acceptable condition. If you were to do all of that work, start doing it and get it all done in this particular year, back when this report was given, it was $16 million, $16,600,074. In fiscal '20, it jumps up to 18 million, and in '21, it's 20 million, and it just keeps rising and rising and rising. You keep putting it off. Right now, we've done, Bob Zozak's he's stretching the dollars as far as he can, but he's basically putting Band-Aids on a lot of these roads, figuring out, well, I'll pick the worst spot, and then some of the roads, though, you drive down the road a little bit, and it's almost as bad. Again, he's trying to stretch the little bit of money he has, and since this study came out, I think it was presented or initially talked about in '17, and then it was done, and then it was presented in '18. There's been no real funding discussion, no plan, if you will, of, okay, how are we going to address this? Where is the money gonna come from? If we continue to wait on the state, the governor's plan and the one being talked about at the legislature, raising gas prices, diesel tax on, fuel, a lot of that money is gonna go to the MBTA. There's a good article to read, if you can find it, from this past Sunday's Boston Globe. The Sunday Globe. It's something put out, I think, by Speaker DeLeo, or he is referenced in it a lot. The town of Hubbardston attempted to do this. It passed at town meeting, as it often does, but it fails at the ballot. And their article would have to appropriate money in a special purpose stabilization fund in the amount of $350,000, in addition to their Chapter 90 funding, and they actually put forth in front of town meeting 5 years, 5 major roads that were gonna be totally redone. And they had been working on getting grant money, getting this money, and tried to do work on their roads, but again, they tried this avenue and it failed. It's something I think that we should try, at least creating the special stabilization fund and perhaps taking a little, however much out of free cash that's left standing right now. And yes, I am asking if the board consider putting this in front of town meeting this year at the annual town meeting to get this fund created. Again, however you fund it, this is a special purpose fund only for roads and drainage. We're not, even an override, the special purpose override, if you do it, it can only be used for certain things, and it can end at any time. And if we ever get this on an agenda item, I will bring a copy of the law, and the samples, and the procedures. And it's basically, in addition to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B. You can find that on the web, and then if you accept Section 4B, you can, it can go away at any time. And again, it doesn't go for the roads for this year, and then next year it just gets dumped on the pile.
Right.
It doesn't happen. And again, we spent the money on the pavement study, we have basically an outline of what needs to be done and how it can be done, and I think we should follow through on that. My other item is ambulance receipts, and the gentleman said that the town is covering 43%, I think, of our ambulance fire department costs with ambulance receipts, but if you follow along the last few years, the general fund budget of the town has been supplemented by a transfer of $250,000 from ambulance receipts to the general fund. And to make budget cuts work, and I believe with one full-time firefighter paramedic leaving, to make it work, there was another $20,000 transferred out of there at the request of the fire chief, to use to shore up the operations of the ambulance and the fire department. Back in special town meeting, November 7th, 2011, there was an article, Article 8, to see if the town will vote to create a fire department ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation account where collected ambulance receipts for services are placed beginning with fiscal year 2013. Monies out of this fund are expended only through town meeting vote for the purpose of funding various fire department capital requests pursuant to the betterment of the fire department services deemed by the Templeton Fire Chief. Now the motion, and for the record, I was on the Board of Selectmen at the time. I trusted that the then current board and future boards of selectmen, town administrative, fire chiefs would honor the intent of town meeting vote. My mistakes. And I would like to propose to try to ask town meeting if they would amend their vote to try to correct this. The motion that was passed, motion duly made and seconded, the town voted to create a fire ambulance reserve for appropriation account where collected ambulance receipts for services are placed with beginning with fiscal year 2013. That motion that was voted on, and that's what counts, was not specific, and it would only be used for ambulance or fire department capital needs. And if you remember, or if you don't, May 19th, 2018, annual town meeting, Article 29, the least capital items, fire. There is $92,500 raise and appropriate, that's out of taxation, to pay for the first year of a 6-year lease for a fire engine, a fire apparatus. We're always telling the townspeople we're under financial pressure. We only have this many, was it $200-something thousand for, out of Prop 2.5. We don't seem to have the political will to only budget off what we actually collect from taxation in a certain year, which I believe is 97%. It may have jumped a little bit, but the last percentage I have is 97. We do what the law allows, and we budget off of 100%, and I know we eventually get that 2.5%, 3%, somewhere down the road. But in one fiscal year, you are not going to collect all of the tax levy that you can, that you bill out. You know you're not. You have a historical record showing it for years and years. And I think to, again, take some pressure off of taxation and honor the intent of town meeting. And since it seems we don't honor that intent, I believe it should go back to town meeting to ask them if they would like to amend their vote and set that ambulance receipts aside to only be used for the betterment of the ambulance and fire service and capital items. As Carter stated at the budget initial presentation, we'd like to buy an ambulance, but we don't have the cash. Well, we do. We are never gonna build up that fund that has been put out several times over the last 3, 4 years. Well, we gotta let it build up. We're not gonna it's not gonna build up if we keep taking $250,000 out of it to shore up the general fund budget. And I know, yes, well, that goes into a
That's
big
what's
pile
gonna
of
come.
money,
I know.
and some of it goes to the fire department in this.
How can you ignore that part?
I'm not saying it's easy, but the intent for that article was there. And I believe that's part of the problem when you go down to town meeting, when you really need something down the road. Why should we believe you? Why should we trust you this time? Because you didn't honor this, you didn't follow the intent. And again, it's not, the motion was not specific. And that's an error that I accept. Did not insist the motion be as specific as the warrant article was, and then we wouldn't have this issue. But it's something, again, I think we owe it to the people and let them decide. Throw it all on the table. Yes, this is gonna drain some money off of the general fund budget that is funded mainly 3 places: taxation, state aid, which is not a guarantee, and local receipts. The biggest thing of local receipts is vehicle motor excise tax. I know that's gonna cut into that. But you have 92,000 of taxation going for a fire when you could be coming out of the ambulance receipts. It's, that itself right there, that thing would be a wash. The 92,000 would still be in the budget. It wouldn't be going, because it would be coming out of ambulance receipts. So I would request that those 2 things be as an agenda item at our next business meeting to discuss, to place on the warrant in front of town meeting.
I agree, we can't rely on state aid and grant
Yes.
money, we need to come up with things.
State aid has not gone up. It's like chapter 90 money. It's been $200 million for, except for, I think, 15, when it was 300 million. They're talking about doing a 1-year supplemental to 300 million now, but it's basically stayed at $200 million.
Right.
And again, our ambulance
Yeah.
receipts, it's never gonna build up to use for anything, because we keep taking for it to use for the general fund. It goes back to Mr. May's point about a good, honest, balanced budget. That,
You
it
gotta-
looks that we're
yeah.
not really
I hear you.
putting the effort forth. My feelings are not new. I've spoke on this many times, in different ways. And I'm asking if that be put on the agenda for the business meeting for the entire board, whoever members that show up,
Got it.
I'm trying to think outside the box too.
for town meeting.
You know, you hear,
They can decide.
businesses.
Thank you.
It's really, I don't wanna discuss, you go back and forth and questions and everything, because that's what Jeff is asking for, so I can grant him that.
Yeah,
But-
no, I was just thinking of something else.
So, you have more
No.
board com- okay.
Well, I
The
was
time
thinking,
for-
trying to think outside the box and maybe try to get local businesses involved too. I heard of this thing called Firehouse Subs, where every time they sell one, a percentage of that goes to the fire department in their town. You know, it'd be something if we could reach out to area businesses maybe, to come up with different things on their menu. And a portion of those sales go to the department, like if they came up, I don't know, I know the police department, something, fire,
at some point in time, we're gonna have to come to the conclusion that it would be cheaper in the long run to have one fire station instead of two. And there's 18 acres of town-owned land at the current Templeton Highway site. I know there are some wet issues there and stuff, but, you know, you want two roofs, two heating systems, two this, two that. They're old buildings. It was pointed out that they don't meet a lot of the standards, and the shortcomings are only gonna increase. And the cost to do it is just gonna increase every year. Anyway, that was my two things that I would request to be on the agenda.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
All right, so just quickly for what I had for this evening, it kind of killed me a couple meetings ago that we had a gentleman waiting over in the corner all night. He had some things that he wanted to address with his private road. We were ultimately able to listen to those, but he was not aware of what the process was for this meeting. I got you. So what I'd like to work on, what I'd like to do for the board and for the community is come up with a guide to the Board of Selectmen meetings. There's a lot that goes on in these meetings. It's business, it's workshops and otherwise. Even sometimes we have some confusion on what we're supposed to be doing up here and what the left and right limits are to these things. So what I'd like to pledge is that I'd like to work on and maybe get some input as I get through it, maybe come up with a draft and everyone takes a look at it, but a guide to the Board of Selectmen meetings that describes what are the left and right limits, when they have public comment, what is typically do you bring up there? What is it used for? How often do you do it? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable? Is it just an open mic night? For old business and new business, what does that mean? For its board members and comments, what does that mean? Because me as the chair, I've got to kind of control this process. It's not supposed to look like a mess. That's my job, to make sure it looks like it's an efficient process so that we don't get upset, so we don't skip over things. So I'd like to work on that for you. And I also like to, and I think I talked about it before, I don't think I was dreaming about it, but certainly it seems long enough ago that I talked about it that it might have been a dream. But more to your point, earlier in our meeting, Jeff, when you had a long list of things, we need an action item tracker. We need to be able to understand what are we trying to do, us, the Board of Selectmen, not, Carter and Adam have their work cut out for them. The department's head have their own things they're working on. They publish the weekly report, but something that we have for ourselves that's public, that's available, that says, here are the things that we're working on, that it's important to us, whether we prioritize it or not. I think it's important that we are able to manage ourselves so that we have parity, we have equality, we understand that we're a board. Yeah, I'm the chair, but we're all the board. We all have things that we're trying to be able to do that we promise to the people that put us in these chairs. So I'd like to try and figure out, how do we get an action item together, an action tracker, what is the issue? Someone brings us something during public comments, like Mr. Drury's issue. That way we have a status that we can either provide to people or we can provide to ourselves. So I can come back. Jeff has got a long list right now. I'd like to be able to address all of the things that he has. I'd also like to compare that list that we have sometimes with our goals that we wind up going through in the fall time, and make sure that these are commensurate. Because there's another thing I need to do as the chair, is balance our workload and make sure that we have the staff for that. I've been a manager a long time. I think I can be able to do that, but I can't do it without some kind of tracker for the things that we have going on.
We get requests from the advisory council.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, anything, if we have stuff like that, what would go on the action tracker is Lee's email
Right.
requesting to take a look at the IMA. So that's another thing that I'd like to work on.
Mr. Francis, he almost got swept under the carpet. His letters came in and nobody
Yep.
nobody picked that up on that.
Staff? Okay. We have one or two requests for executive session this evening.
We had nothing new on the Templeton Elementary School, we did get the memorandum of understanding in lieu of amending the district agreement. I have sent that along to council, and we'll have a brief for you on that next week. But absent that, and we have no new wording on that, so I don't need
Okay.
anything on that. We had a request to brief you on pending litigation. However, there is no quorum of the board that would be able to participate in that tonight. And we weren't able to get the staff together that we need on short notice. That, I think I dealt with that on Sunday. So I'd like to just arrange a date with you, Mr. Chairman, to
Okay.
brief the
We
board
don't
on
have a
that.
quorum tonight to do what?
You do not have quorum tonight that could be briefed on
It's
that.
that thing.
On the pending litigation.
Oh, okay,
me.
understood, yep,
Okay.
okay.
I do, however, wish to request a executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Sub A-2, which is strategy for negotiations with non-union personnel. And that would include the members of the board and myself for a few moments. I would then leave that session, to leave it to you for your discussions. I do not anticipate any action as a result of that.
would
So would
agree.
anticipate that you would be reconvening only for the purposes of adjournment.
Okay, yep, I would agree with that. I would entertain a motion for a executive session in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A2, strategy negotiations with non-union personnel.
Second.
Motion in a second. Any discussion? Hearing none on the motion to go into executive session and not come out, only to come out to close the meeting. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A2, negotiations with non-union personnel. How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, Holly. Good night.
Okay,
Taking a break?
yeah, just a quick break, so